Only one sale away from the Shopify 1000 Club.
Is that a thing?
Wow, Mom, have a cookie.
I'll take one.
Dad.
These are delicious. You need to show them.
You should.
Mom.
No, seriously. Let's set you up on Shopify. It's easy.
I always knew you would build your own business.
Guys.
Yum.
When you're ready to bring your idea to life, build it on Shopify.
Sign up for a free 14-day trial at shopify.com/offer22. Shopify.com/offer22.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor and subscribe to the John Com Report wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Much appreciated. If you're not on YouTube and you want to see us on YouTube, go to Empire Media Network on YouTube. That's AMPIRE. I always say it's much appreciated because it is. Today, I'm joined by former Washington tight end Logan Paulsen, a favorite of mine and a favorite of yours. He's going to give us really good insight into what he has seen watching practice over the last couple of weeks. We talked not just about Jahan Dotson and Carson Wentz. There's some really good stuff there, but also the tight end group, why he likes this rookie class. Brian Robinson and some vets who have jumped out to him in a very positive way, and one corner who's had some few struggles this spring. So stay tuned for that. I'll get to that in a minute. You can follow Logan on Instagram at Logan_Paulsen82. He does a lot of breakdowns there. He's also has a podcast with Craig Hoffman called Take Command. Check him out there as well. As for me, you can read my work on ESPN.com. All sorts of stories going to be up there. Some stuff on the stadium vote right now, and I'm going to get to that in 1 second. And give me about 2 minutes before I get to Logan. So first of all, on Thursday, the Virginia General Assembly decided to table a vote on the stadium until the next year. Now, not a surprise, expected that to happen. So all the talk about was it Jack Del Rio's comments that pushed him over. This was headed this way anyways. Now, the timing of it wasn't great. It certainly may have pushed some over the edge, but I think they were going there anyways. Simply put, they didn't have enough support for the stadium in the state. And it's for a variety of reasons. Yes, it has to do with the owner, Dan Snyder. It has to do with all the off-field stuff and all the issues going on. I think they'd like those to be resolved and then move past that. And then the other thing is I talked to one state senator who said it's about transportation. This is one of the worst bottleneck areas on the East Coast. They need to come up with a transportation plan to take care of it. They've been trying to get Metro down there for years. I don't know that this is going to expedite anything. So they've got to come up with a plan to alleviate transportation concerns. So it's a swirl of reasons as to why. And Chap Peterson, of course, who is a longtime Redskins fan, and I don't think he's much of a Commanders fan, but his thing has been he doesn't see the support for a pro sports franchise. What I know is my podcast has grown during one of the most turbulent periods of this franchise's history. So I know you guys are still out there because you're listening. So there you go. One reminder on the stadium vote too. Jack Kent Cooke had a hell of a time getting that stadium built way back in the 90s. They were coming off a Super Bowl. He was a quote unquote beloved owner, but he did not get along with the DC Mayor Sharon Pratt Kelly, had trouble in Virginia when we tried to build in Alexandria. They said, no way. Then he went to Maryland, paid for it on his own. So all the talk, and yes, Dan Snyder has not helped this franchise, but Cooke had a hard time getting stuff built here too. And he was in a much different spot. They're in a much worse spot now, and I think it makes it harder. So we'll see where this goes. Finally, on Jack Del Rio. Now, we talked about it the other day. Not going to rehash all the controversy. My thing right now is, does it affect the locker room? So I called around to a few people today. First of all, he's not getting fired. So unless something dramatically changes, okay, not getting fired. Secondly, as far as like how it plays in the locker room, you heard what John Allen said, and that's the sentiment I've gotten from a lot of people. They don't care what somebody thinks. They just want to know, can you make me better? Can you help me on the field? Are you working hard? As long as that's the case, it's not going to be an issue. The issue will come in if they start to struggle or he's inflexible with certain things. And that's one of the knocks that has been on Jack Del Rio over the years is, does the ego get in the way? And I think that's something more so than what he said or tweeted, et cetera. I talked to multiple people about this. Now, I'm sure there's going to be some guys who are going to be bothered by it, but I don't think it's going to be an issue. Okay. So, and I talked to Logan about this in a minute from a locker room perspective, not about whether he's right or wrong. That's for anybody else to decide, and it's his opinion, but just the impact in the locker room. So right now, I don't see that based on what I've heard from people close to players, and the players tell these guys a lot of things. So that's why I feel comfortable saying that I don't know they see it. In fact, I had one guy tell me that's Chase Young's guy, loves Jack Del Rio. So there you go. Where it goes from here, who knows? But that's what I know right now. So that's enough from me. Let's get to my conversation with former Washington tight end Logan Paulsen. Logan, I finally had a chance to get out and watch some practice, and we can finally talk some ball from based on what I've seen as well. And one of the guys that I want to get to is Jahan Dotson, because it takes one time watching him to realize this kid could be really good. And we'll get to that in a minute, but I do want to start with the quote unquote fun topic, which is all the Jack Del Rio flap. But I don't want to go down a political road. My only concern here is in the locker room, how do someone's beliefs or things they say and you can speak in general, because you're not going to know all that's going on there. Right. But in general, you may have a coach who thinks differently than you. You may have a coach who says certain things. How does that stuff play out in the locker room? Can it affect a locker room?
Yeah. I was talking to my wife about this last night because, it's such a different time than it was. But I will say, like, in my experience, and I can only speak on my experience, which is 10 years with a whole bunch of different teams and a whole bunch of different time periods. Like, I got to I got to be in San Francisco right after Colin Kaepernick was there. I got to be in Atlanta, which is a very progressive, kind of forward-thinking organization with regards to like social justice and things like that. And I will say that the locker room traditionally is very apolitical. You know what I mean? Like, everyone has their beliefs, right? They have their, you're bringing guys in from all over the country, like inner city kids, rural country kids. And it's kind of a melding of cultures and melding of the minds. And for the most part, it tends to be very apolitical. Like at lunch, you might have a conversation about who the next president's going to be or whatever, and it gets a little bit heated. But for whatever reason, and I don't know why this is, maybe it's the common goal of like beating the opponent the next week. For whatever reason, that always just kind of gets quashed and gets washed under the rug. There's people on the team, there's people on the team now with the Commanders that have very kind of extreme beliefs, right and left leaning, and there's never any friction or any reported friction about those interactions. So usually those things are pretty calm. I think this is a little bit unique because it is a coordinator, right? Because it is a person in a position of power, and it might affect the dynamic. But I would imagine most guys, at least in my experience, they don't think about this like kind of grandiose political thing. Like when I was in San Francisco, obviously, Reed was there, the safety from LSU, and he was very politically minded. And so that was something we talked about a lot. But as a team, it was something that came up in team meetings, and it was something that the team kind of wanted to address. And I'm not sure that Ron feels that way, and we'll see how it happens over the next couple of weeks. But I do think that traditionally these things tend to get kind of pushed by. People might be upset for a short period of time, but they're worried about winning football games, in my experience. And I think that's probably going to play out here.
Well, that's what John Allen told JP Finley, that he just wants a coordinator who's going to work really hard, and whatever they believe because they're allowed to believe it, etc. Do you think like a guy, like how many players do you think would be comfortable going to somebody in Jack's position to talk to him about this if they indeed had a problem?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and the answer is I don't know. I'm trying to, when this happened, I try to think back to see if anything there was even a precedent in my career, precedent that I'd heard about for this, and there wasn't really one, right? Obviously, there are coaches who have different beliefs than the players, but usually that's kept pretty quiet. So for a guy to kind of openly express his political position, which could be, an issue with some of the other players on the team, or some of the players on the team, some of the younger players. And I will say this too, it's important to note that the NFL, even in my time period, changed pretty drastically, in terms of players being kind of politically minded. So it wouldn't surprise me if there are people who are upset by this and want to talk to Jack. I think it just depends on their level on the team, quite frankly. Like, I don't think a rookie's going to go talk to Jack Del Rio about their political ideologies and their political differences. I don't. But if a guy like John, had wanted to go talk to Jack, or he felt compelled to, I think that would be totally appropriate. You know what I mean? I think he's earned that right. He's earned that opportunity. And I think he has his place in this organization to do that if he wanted to. Same thing with Terry. If Terry felt like the need or compelled to do that, I think that would be totally appropriate. And like, they're both grown men. They can have a conversation about it, and then get back to work, you know? And I think, and I think Jack would respect someone like that coming to him with a differing opinion, for sure.
And I wonder too, like, if some of those players, they're making so much money, they know, like, hey, it gives me some freedom to go then at least talk to you about it.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right. Like, you know, money is power in the NFL. The more money you make, the more leeway you have. I like to use this analogy, like the longer leash you have. You know, as a player, like, I think about guys like Trent Williams, and like, he was off his leash down the block doing whatever he wanted. He could say or do whatever he wanted because he's one of the best players ever at his position, right? And then me, I'm like tied to the stake in the yard, right? The leash is right to my neck. So I could never in my time ever go talk to a coach about anything like this. You know, I would maybe talk to my position coach, you know, and kind of say, like, this is how the guys are feeling. And, you know, later in my career when I was older, like, I had a leadership role, and, you know, coaches would come ask me and I would give my opinion then, but I never really would have felt comfortable going directly to a coach because my margin for error was so small. So I think, I think back to, like, like guys like London Fletcher, guys like Zoe, guys like Hedrick, guys that were leaders in the locker room when I was young here. I would expect those guys, I would go to those guys and say, like, hey man, I don't really feel comfortable with this. And then they would go and handle that. And that's what a well-led team does, is they kind of manage this and they make sure everyone's heard. And that's why having guys in those leadership positions are so important, quite frankly, in the locker room. So again, this is a little unusual to have a coordinator come out and kind of, express such a strong opinion. So it'll be interesting to see how the team handles it, but usually the team is built in a way that it can kind of handle this and it can get communicated well. It's an issue that they got to handle, and it's something that you don't want to be thinking about because all you want to think about is football as a player. Like, I'm 100% like my football, when Jack said this, my football kind of PTSD came back, and I was like, man, like, why are we talking about this? We should be talking about football, but this is something that the locker room can handle and will handle. And I think the more interesting question is like what Ron does with the whole thing. But in terms of the locker room, I think it'll be okay.
What can he do with it? Like, what do you think?
I think that's the $1 million question. That's why that guy gets paid a lot of money to be a leader in this type of situation. And I think it has to be addressed in the locker room. I think it would be appropriate for Ron to kind of bring it up and say, hey, like, this is what we did. This is what Jack said. This is what Jack said as an apology. If you have anything you'd like to say to Jack, like, maybe set a time aside and go talk to Jack about it specifically, but from this time to this time, like, we're talking about football and we're here to win games and we're here to win a Super Bowl or we're here to win a playoff game, whatever his goal is for the 2022 season. And then just make sure the players have an opportunity to express themselves if they do have some kind of discontent, and make sure they can do it in a professional manner. Because, as much as people want to think of the NFL as the Wild West, it is a professional environment, and just making sure people have a platform to be heard. Because if something festers like that and there's like some malcontent, I think that just leads to bad things down the road,
And my other big thing with it too, and again, everybody's got freedom of speech, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's creating another headline for this franchise that didn't need another headline.
I think that's probably the most frustrating thing. Like, as much as like maybe I didn't have the best ending experience here in Washington, like, this place will always have a special place in my heart as a player. My family lives here, right? We love it. Our kids are growing up here, all that kind of thing. And I can't tell you, over the years, like, I've had hundreds of fans come up to me and said, I've been a lifelong fan. We're just waiting for him to turn the corner. And through OTAs, like, we'll talk about this in a second, like, there has been a lot of things to be excited about.
Yeah.
The quarterbacks look good. Your first round draft picks look good. All of your draft picks have looked good. You're getting development, from second year guys. It's like, this is positive football conversation that all of a sudden is kind of sidetracked by things unrelated to football. And I think that's the thing that's really frustrating about it, is like, this team, at least in my time covering and playing for the team, has always got something kind of swirling around. And this will probably just be a little speed bump, I think, in the grand scheme of, Washington football controversy, unfortunately. But it is something that has to be talked about, because it is an important issue.
Right. And again, my point of view is always, my job here is to talk about how it could impact this team. not about political persuasion, anything like that. People
Right.
can choose what they want to do and all that, but it's only the impact there. And that's why I want to ask you about that. But let's get to the field, because I think that's what people still wanted to hear about. And, you bring up, let's start with the quarterback. Always a good place to start. One of the things that, first of all, we know that he has a big arm, right? Carson Wentz has a big arm. That's not a surprise to see that. One thing that Ron has talked about too is that he's like, Carson's very hard on himself. And he's like, he'll hear him talking, he'll turn around. It's like, it's Carson mumbling to himself about something he should have done on a particular play. So like, those are little things that you start to see. But what are some things that you see that say, okay, this could work because?
Yeah, I think the first thing you got to talk about is the arm strength. And like, just when you compare Wentz to Heineke on throw to throw basis, like you just see what it does for the offense. Like and Heineke's had a very solid OTA period, right? He has a mastery of the offense. He's making the correct reads, like all of those things. But I think every day there's a throw. Like, 3 days ago, Diami's running a seam up the sideline and Heineke throws it. It's the right read. Diami's got a step and the ball kind of flutters and dives inside, right? And like the very next play, Jahan runs a post and Carson makes a throw that only like 5 dudes in the NFL can make. And you say like, that's the difference in the offense, right? And then, so obviously there's the physical capability that Carson has, and everyone's talked about that. That's been well documented. That's why they brought him here. I think, Ron talked a lot about fit, and you understand why they like the fit here so much because of that physical skill set. But then 2 days ago, there's a dig on the left side of the offensive formation, and they're in quarters coverage, right? And so Carson looks to the dig and then shuffles his feet and then throws the post over the top. And just like the subtle eye manipulation of the defense there to manufacture that big play, I think speaks to the skill set of a gentleman who's been around the NFL for a long time. Now his career has been up and down, and that's been well documented as well. But he obviously has kind of that skill set, that vision, that kind of second level thinking for the position, which I think is extremely valuable. Now, like the negative speak about himself, I think is indicative of some confidence issues, maybe that's the thing I'm most concerned about with him. Because like when you watch practice, you're like, he's got everything you want. He's big, he's physical, he's kept the ball a couple times on some zone reads and RPO stuff. That's where the defender's got his hands up, he's had a run, and you see a big athletic dude. And even though he's not maybe the athlete he was when he was drafted, he's very, very skilled. So just in terms of what it does for the offense, like this offense all of a sudden looks like, this is going to sound maybe harsh, but looks like an NFL offense, right? Every throw, the field is open to him. And I think that's something that gets me super excited. And again, there's the psychological element of playing the quarterback position, but I think he just brings so much to the table and he makes this offense so much better.
And he also one of the things he talked about too the other day, he said that there are times when he looks back on his career too, where he was running more early in his career. He kind of wants to get away from that. And,
sure.
And out here, you're not going to see him run a whole lot. You shouldn't see him run a whole lot, but you do see him using some of that mobility. I think there was a play yesterday where kind of gets out of something. And he's able to kind of, different arm slot, makes a nice completion to the back. You see the ability to do some of that stuff, but how much does he need to do you think he needs to get away from some of the running, or has that not been, a big issue for him? And
so I think the big thing with him specifically is just knowing when the play's dead. Like as a runner, when you got the football in your hands, sometimes you got to know when the play's dead. Like that's something I had a really hard time with early in my career. Like I'd be running, I'd be breaking tackles, and there's a period where your ball security is becoming, because you've been jostled around so much, is becoming worse and worse as the down goes on and the ball is becoming more and more exposed. And so I remember I had a conversation with my coach. He's like, sometimes like the ball is the most important thing. Sometimes you just got to get down. And so sometimes when I see Carson Wentz, I feel like he doesn't always understand that sometimes it's better just to take a bad play instead of making that bad play worse. And one of the features of his bad plays is when he starts trying to extend plays, outrun defensive linemen, and really try to manufacture that big throw, that big play, that wow moment. And he can do it, but you don't need to do it all the time. You need to be more selective about when that happens. So I think that's something that I want to keep an eye on for him, is just how is he managing that kind of hero ball element? I'm sure that term's been thrown around a lot on this show, And that's something it's because it's important. It's a characteristic it's a negative characteristic of his game that he got away with early in his career, and it kind of bred confidence. Another analogy is like that running back who's always looking for the home run shot. Like that is not effective running back play. Sometimes you just got to cram it in there and take the cloud of dust and live to play another down instead of taking a 5-yard loss. That's something that he needs to learn how to do. And I think that if you look back on his plays from last year and the year before, those plays were caused oftentimes by him trying to extend the play, be a runner when he should just throw the ball away and live to play the next down.
So the other spot before I get to Dotson, because so much has been talked about with Dotson too, but guys like, the young tight ends, not just Cole Turner, but the young tight ends. You seem to be pretty high on that group. Just what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think the thing with the group is like, as an evaluator of football, like there's certain physical characteristics you look for, right? Like in the draft, you're like, oh, is he this height? Is he this weight? Is his speed good? And for whatever reason, they've been able to find people who are excellent in all of those measurables. 3 guys: Cole Turner, Curtis Hodges, and Armani Rogers, I think is his name. And they're all tall. They're all 6'6" plus. They're all between 245 and 250, and they all run really well outside of Hodges, who didn't run as well. But when you watch his tape, I feel like he's a better athlete than his numbers would indicate. So you've got these 3 kind of athletic guys that I think a lot of people would characterize it as developmental guys. But, when you compare them to Sam East, for example, who's a true developmental guy, they're very, very close to contributing to this roster. So like if you were to make the Commanders roster today, and assuming Logan Thomas is on IR, it's Bates, Cole Turner, Hodges are your guys that are playing football for you. And the crazy thing about it is you don't feel bad about it, because you watch Hodges. I'd say, he had a slow start. He had a nice 4-day stretch where he was catching everything. He was getting open. He was turning DBs around. He was competing. He's competing in line. He's not excelling. He's competing in line, which you love. Then he pulls his hamstring. Cole Turner, again, we've talked about this a lot. You see the suddenness. You see his leg strength when he has to make kind of a speed cut. He can just throw his foot in the ground, which is an unusual characteristic for a guy who's 6'6.5". And then you see the catch radius. And, as an evaluator, guy, you watch him, you say, does that catch radius transfer? Does he have the play strength? And when you see him, obviously we need to put the pads on. There's a lot of things that still need to happen, but you see that and you say, wow, that part of the evaluation that Castillo, that Ron, that the staff did here and said that catch radius is going to be so important, because that dude, because of his height, weight, speed, is always now open. And because he can compete for those 50-50 balls, it's just a nice skill set within the offense. And because he's got this mental edge, you can tell. I think I told this story before, but the first day they had a false start in the tight end group and they had to do conditioning afterwards. And I stayed after and watched them run. And he sprinted those like his life depended on it. And you can tell he's got a little bit of an edge to him, which is something as an evaluator you want to see, because that guy's going to get better as the season goes on. So again, that group of 3 right there. And then I didn't even mention Rogers. Like every day, he played quarterback in college at Ohio, and every day he gets better. And every day you see him run and open it up, and you're like, man, how unusual is it to have 3 guys that are this kind of high upside guys on the same roster? They seem to all have a good mindset. They all seem to be coachable. Like when I watch individuals and stuff like that, it's just like an embarrassment of riches. So obviously there is a growth that needs to happen. So I'm not saying they're going to be all Pro Bowlers right away, but to have them all here, all under contract, is a really good problem to have, especially with Logan Thomas's injury.
Right. And I think the key here is they're good guys to try and develop. Because we still don't know where they're going to go, but they have tools and traits that are worth developing. And, so because I don't want to hear if somebody sees, oh, here's embarrassment of riches, like, oh, they're going to be awesome this year. It's about having guys that are worth developing is the key. And then there's a lot that goes into it, but it wouldn't be shocking to see some of them contribute this year. Another guy that I want to ask about is Brian Robinson, because it's really hard to tell with running backs. And I always use an example of Larry Johnson when he was here one summer, and in training camp, it's like everybody's like, oh my God, he looks great. He had this long run. Well, in the games, it was a 2-yard run. He was done, but in practice, you couldn't tell. So, but I also know when Alfred Morris was here, you could see certain traits. They're like, oh, this kid might be better than you think. So what kind of traits are you seeing with Robinson, just in shorts and helmet and T-shirt, that you think, hey, this might translate well?
Yeah, so I think it's important. There are certain positions that you can evaluate at a pretty high level, like cornerback, receiver, tight end to a certain extent. Without pads on, you get a really good feel for what they're doing. Running back is one of those positions that's very, very challenging without pads on, as you know,
Right.
and as you alluded to. But one of the things you do see from him, and that does make you excited, is you see the vision and you see his ability to set up blocks. And I think, again, and you see the contact balance. Like, so what I mean by that is, like, he'll go into a pile of people and he's kind of hopping around, trying to find the crease and wedging in there, and people are banging into him, and he never loses his base. He never loses his balance. And again, that's one data point, but that's something that gets you excited. And then the thing that gets you really excited is the thing that you can test kind of regardless, is his vision, right? So he'll be, he's on his track and he's pressing. He looks like he's going to bury the run, bury in the guard's back, and the linebacker pops over to the double team. The double team lands, then he cuts back and it's a 5-yard gain. And it could be more, he could break a tackle, whatever it is, but he's creating that space. He's creating those angles for the offensive line. And I think that's
which he did in college too.
Yes. And I think that's the big thing, is he did it in college. And so one of the things everyone says the OTA period is nonsense. You get no information out of it. I get to see how the speed, how the size, how the vision, how the cuts, all that stuff lines up with NFL talent, and this is the first time to do it. And it's kind of like a glorified walkthrough, whatever it is, but at least you can see those traits, and that applies to the NFL, which is encouraging, right? It's the same thing with Cole Turner. It's the same thing with Jahan. It's the same thing with Fedarian. You're seeing traits, things that they did well, and how they apply with bigger, stronger, faster people who are much more higher football IQs at the NFL level. So all good things. And like when you talk to people around the building about them, they feel the same way. And again, running back is a pad position. You need to have pads on to finish that evaluation. But in terms of kind of checking boxes early on and giving you a nice complementary piece to what you already have, like, it's so interesting because usually you draft offensive linemen to make your running back better. Here, this is a kind of a unique situation because Robinson's vision is so good, and because he's shown such good vision, the offensive line production will improve, I think, just because of that. So it's kind of this reverse situation that you normally get. Offensive line helping back? No, back helping the offensive line.
Let's go to the defense real quick. Fedarian Mathis, but also Fedarian Mathis combined with Jamin Davis, Cole Holcomb.
Yeah, so I think that I'm really glad you made that comparison because Fedarian, obviously the first couple of days, I think it was a little fast for him. I think when you're going against a guy like Cosme, who has like the highest RAS score since Taylor Lewan, that's a new thing to see. And he had a hard time. But then as the camp days went on, you saw him kind of using some of that length, getting in the position, backdooring double teams, doing sneaky kind of vet stuff and stuff that you saw in college, and applying it to here. And then every day that he got better, it was crazy to see Holcomb and Jamin got more productive. And I think Holcomb has just been everyone wants to say, is he ready to play? Mike, to me, he's the most he's going to be a good player this year. Is he going to be the highest graded PFF linebacker? No. But is he going to be good? Is he going to be solid? Can he get you lined up? Is he physical? Is he fast? Yes. And I think with a piece like Fedarian, Duran, when he comes back, I think he's going to have a really productive year. And then I think you mentioned Jamin. Like Jamin's play, he's not in as much because they're running like 5 downs. They're running some Buffalo nickel variations. They're running dime variations, and he's kind of the sub piece in that. But when he is in, you see a guy who's just much more confident to the football. Like now, he still needs to take on blocks. He still needs to, work on his vision at times. Still needs to work on his tackling. But in terms of a guy who's playing more confident and playing faster, which is the main thing with him. Dude runs a 4.4. Let's see the 4.4.
Right.
You're starting to see the 4.4 come along a little bit more. You're starting to see him run by guys to the football. You're starting to see him peel double teams to his gap quickly and effectively. And those are all very, very healthy signs. Now, again, linebackers, much like running back, you need shoulder pads on to ultimately get that out. But I like to see that the mental processes are progressing for him, because that is a really good sign that his physical play will also follow.
Let's secondary. Benjamin St. Juste to me jumped out. We've talked about him, but and we talked about him, and I could see what you're talking about. And I think they have been really pleased with his play inside. What's been your take on him? Why why is he playing like this? Right. Again, it's June, so I don't want people to go crazy, but again, traits that you're seeing. So what traits are you seeing from him that have let him have a good spring.
Well, I think the thing is that you see a lot of what got you excited last year, and it's a guy who plays with very patient feet and has excellent arm length. And so he's a very tough matchup for receivers.
That arm length is a huge deal too, by the way. And I know, I hear it from people here too.
Yeah. And you can just see, like, Jahan, for example, has looked absolutely phenomenal. Like he's turning DBs around. He's creating great separation. He's challenging guys. And then in the slot, which is where they thought he was going to be kind of excelling, he's matching up with Benjamin St-Juste, and Benjamin St-Juste is he's so patient with his feet, and he's got such long arms. Like, Jahan is getting open, but it's so late in the down because he's got to fight with these long arms and work, that it's not a win. You know what I mean? Even though it's a late win, it's not a win because it's not the timing of the play. And I think that that's a big testament to Benjamin St-Juste, and the fact that he's playing this kind of Buffalo nickel hybrid and fitting runs and fitting screens, and you can see a physicality there. Now, again, I worry about the concussions and I worry about his health,
and it's a different type of nickel role than obviously Landon Collins would have played, but he's able to fill a nickel role for them.
Yeah, and I think, like, that's the thing. People think, oh, Buffalo nickel's this unique thing. It's just a difference in personnel, really. It's just finding a guy who you feel comfortable playing nickel versus base, like so, versus two tight ends or versus a tight end and a fullback, a guy that can keep you nickel personnel on the field, and that's Landon, right? So I'm not sure if Benjamin St-Juste is going to be that nickel, but it's the same position. The responsibilities are very similar. So he does have to fit runs. He does have to fit nickel runs, and he's done a great job with that. And you like his physicality. You like his matchups. He bumped outside because William Jackson III wasn't there yesterday. And again, you just love how calm he is with his feet. Sean Springs, I got to talk to him about Benjamin St-Juste earlier this week, and he said, like, he just seems to have a plan. He's not flummoxed. Like, when you compare him to other corners on the roster, the other corners are anxious. You can see the tension in their body, and there's not that with him, which means he's confident. He knows what he's doing, and he's just playing at a high level. So, obviously, like you said, it's very early in the offseason, but cornerback is a position that lends itself to early evaluation because it's athletically based. And obviously there's a physical element too, like Troy Apke, Exhibit A, right? But I think it's important to kind of to give him his due, right? Because he's done a really nice job. And he's had some busts at the nickel, which is tough because, like, Scott Turner's done a great job of kind of formationally challenging rules within the defense. But again, just from like a down-to-down consistency, like, him and Kendall Fuller have just been doing an outstanding job in terms of cornerbacks.
I love Kendall Fuller, and I always have, because I always think he's a smart player. Yeah, I know he's not hasn't been a Pro Bowl corner. I just like him and his approach. But the other corner, William Jackson, struggled at times last year. What have you seen?
I don't like talking badly about people, but he has had, I think he's struggled a little bit, like, just to put it as succinctly as possible. Like, he's struggled a little bit. And, just like yesterday, seeing Benjamin St-Juste kind of take over for William Jackson III, who was absent yesterday or wasn't practicing yesterday. And you just saw how not easy he made it look, but he was just much more in control. And I think obviously you see the physical skills that William Jackson III has. You see his length, you see his size, you see his speed at times, but also, like, he doesn't always put himself in the best position pre-snap to, so let's say they're playing quarters and it's a tight split, right? Like, you want to kind of leverage outside the receiver, quite frankly, so that you can funnel in to the safeties and the linebacker and use your help. But he's playing that guy head up for some reason. So Diami's able to outside release, sell the post, and break out against bad leverage. And that all stemmed from pre-snap stuff. And then he bumps out to full width. His leverage should change because he wants to force him to the sideline in quarters. Traditionally, I don't know exactly the technique they're coaching, but I'm just assuming, right? And then he doesn't do that. He lines up head up or lines up outside. And he just, again, like, I think that kind of correction would be very beneficial for just making him play with a little bit more consistency, because you see the tools are there, but you got to put yourself in a good position with pre-staff stuff. And I think that's something Sean Springs harped on when we went out and watched practice. And I agree with that. I agree with that 100%.
So speaking of a guy with a plan, I'm getting him to Dotson, and I don't want to gush too much about a kid who hasn't played yet. Yeah. I just like what I've seen. And the thing is, the more you watch him on film, you see the subtle movements. It's not just the big catches and the wide catch radius, which is the buzzword for this year. So what are some of the subtle things that you've seen in his game that might be more than what a typical rookie would show?
Yeah, so I think there's like this notion that people, they go on Instagram and they watch everyone working these like crazy cone drills and double sticks and like these really sudden movements, and they say that is what a receiver is. And that's a big part of playing receiver, no doubt. Like, Wes Welker, Danny Amendola, all those guys that made a living being excellent in that short area space. But there's also this thing like route stems, which take a little bit longer and are a little bit more subtle, and they show a comprehensive understanding of coverage. And it's something I've missed on my evaluation in the past, and I've kicking myself now. But one of the things when you watch Jahan in college is he did that. So like just an example against Maryland, like we were talking about this the other day, he's running a post in the red zone and it's cover 3 and the corner has outside leverage. So he stems inside, the corner matches the inside stem, and then he bursts past the corner to the outside toward the sideline, gets in the corner's blind spot. The corner turns like he's running a go, and then he breaks across his face. There was no double stick. There was nothing sudden there. He just understood what the corner had to do and how to kind of attack the corner's responsibilities. And so you say, well, that's great in college because they run like 4 coverages a game. So, but can he do that in the NFL? And this team runs a lot of variations of very comparable coverages, and everyone's rules kind of shift, and they shift post snap, which makes things really, really tough on quarterbacks and receivers to make these side adjustments. And Jahan has just every single day shown a very high level of understanding of how to beat these guys. Like, second day of OTAs, Bobby McCain's got a man-to-man in the slot. He stems in like he's running across the field, stems vertical, Bobby backs up. He double sticks like he's running a dig. Bobby breaks on the dig and he breaks out for an easy out. And like he's playing chess when everybody else at the receiver position right now is playing checkers, right? I think another play that comes to mind is he had a post, I think it was 2 days ago, where or a big out. So he's running vertical, he sells the post, he breaks it back out and leaves Kendall Fuller on the post. Next day he comes in, he runs the thing to the post, and you're like, okay, he's running the post again. And Kendall Fuller's not a dummy, so he sits down because he's playing the out. Jahan stutters his feet like he's running an out. Kendall stops and breaks on the out, and he breaks the dig, and it's a completion. And so that is stacking routes. That's dictating to your coverage. That's understanding the DB's rules. And again, that stuff's transferable to the season. Now, is he as fast with pads on? Is he as sudden with pads on? I don't know, but that route running stem and setting up that stuff based on coverage, that's some high level stuff now. You know what I mean? Like that's big boy NFL receiver stuff. And that's why when you talk to people around the league, they said he was the most NFL ready receiver of the group. And that's why I liked him more than like a guy like Olave, for example.
Yeah, no, I have really enjoyed what I've seen of him so far, and then going back and watching him. And like even there, like I feel like he's got a plan, and I feel like he attacks their leverage and knows how. And he knew that Kendall was going to react their way, which is why he did that. But we only have about 2 minutes left or so. So I do want to get like, who is a veteran maybe that has emerged in your eyes in a pleasant way that you say, okay, I've now got to pay more attention to him in August?
Yeah, so I think this is going to maybe a cop out, but the guy that's been the best, I think, has kind of positioned himself for a big year this year is Cam Curl.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, he just looks ready. Like his eyes on screens, his eyes on play pass, he's in coverages. Like I think he's, like every safety here is compared to Sean Springs. Or not Sean Springs. Sean
Taylor.
Yeah, Sean Taylor, and like. I was watching practice with Sean Springs, and he was like, man, that kind of he's reminding me of Sean a little bit. You know what I mean? Just because he's making plays, he's where he's supposed to be, he's playing with good energy. And again, in the same way Jahan is kind of, using route stems to set stuff up, like Cam's disguising coverages. He's reading formational tells. He's using pre-snap alignments. And again, it's early and safety is a physical position, but that's something that I think he's
shown that the first 2 years too.
Yes,
like that,
right.
Like this is an evolution of his game more than it is because we saw Troy Apke look good in camp a couple of years ago. It didn't translate, but we had not seen him look good before that either. This guy has looked good. And so to me, it's just a continued evolution of his game. So, I've always, I think the kid's a smart player.
Yeah. And I think, then Cam Curl, obviously, and then I think everyone on the offensive line has done a really nice job. Like Wes Schweitzer at center has been outstanding. Cosme, I think, is poised to be something better, than people were expecting when they drafted him last year. And Leno's been very solid. The 2 guards have done a nice job. So that group, I think, needs a little bit of a shout out because they've kind of been unheralded. I think they all have their limitations, but I think they're gelling together nicely as a group. So that's a group that I think I was concerned about early, but I'm starting to get more confident in as the offseason goes.
Logan, I have always appreciated your time. People listen, always learn. So by the way, I got about a minute left. Tell them where you can not only find you on Instagram, but your podcast.
Yes. So my podcast is Take Command. You can find it wherever you find your podcasts. We talk about a lot of stuff I talk about with yous on there, and just kind of deeper dives into some of the stuff we talk about on like the show with Julie, for example. And then obviously my Instagram is Logan_Paulsen82. And again, just football breakdowns and little tidbits that I find interesting from the film I'm watching and stuff like that.
There you go. Good. It's good stuff. Always great stuff. So you and Craig Hoffman doing a good job on that podcast. So thank you very much. And I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Appreciate it, bud.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Logan for joining me. And thank you, as always, for listening. I'll be back with another episode on Monday. Talk to you next time.